it.
So you basically just gotta adapt as he does. Just like that last one was pretty harsh, and then this one is more mellow.
Short little psalm. It's actually one of my favorite ones because it just really gets to the point, very concise. Psalm 15, your little sub, and oh, by the way, we're just going to be in Psalm 15. We're not doing any cross-referencing today, going over to some New Testament parallel. Just going to be in that. So once you tap your app and get that one, you're good to go. All right. Notice in your little subtitle there, a Psalm of David, so possibly written by King David. And essentially, the psalm is going to pose a question in verse 1 and then spend 4 verses answering it. All right? So verse 1, you have the question. And notice it's posed to the Lord, but the implication is for everyone to listen. Lord, who can dwell in your tent? And then rephrased another way, who can live on your holy mountain? Now, we may look at that and go, well, wait a minute. Okay, what does he mean? Heaven? Is he talking about a tent or the holy mountain as some sort of metaphor for heaven? Well, yes and no. I mean, the main point here is the tabernacle. For David, if you recall in the Old Testament, God, whenever he led Israel out of Egypt, he eventually located his presence in the midst of all the tribes. His address was what we might call Square, right, or Times Square. So all the tribes' apartments or tents were around, and the Lord's presence was in a tent, right, in the tabernacle where the priests would serve, right? And then eventually, as you get into Israel's later history in the era of the monarchy, when they begin to have kings, they eventually put the tent in what David calls Jerusalem, a city that he had taken whenever he was in one of his military campaigns from the Jebusites. So Jerusalem. And so on the mount, the holy mountain, what we call Zion, that's where the tent was located. Then obviously eventually when David died and his son, goodness, can't talk this morning, his son Solomon became king, David had basically, can you imagine having a building program where all the money is there and all the resources are there and all the labor is there? All you have to say is build it. Now that is a building program. That's what Solomon did. He just said, go to work. David had done all the legwork. David wanted to do it. But the Lord said, your son can do it. Well, if I can't do it, I'll do the next best thing. I'll take care of all the red tape so when my boy grows up, he can do it. And Solomon did it. And so you have the temple. on the holy mountain. So the idea here, Lord, who can dwell in your tent? Who can go up to the mountain to be in your presence? Notice here, and not just visit the Lord's presence, who can dwell in the tent? Who can live on the holy mountain? Who is it, Lord, that can come up to your presence and just have the guest room for an indefinite period of time? Who can do that? Now, usually we read that verse and we kind of get the worship praise song goosebumps. Oh yes, Lord, we want to be in the Lord's presence. Oh, it's wonderful. But it's a very intimidating question, especially for the people of Israel knowing what the Lord's presence was like in their day. I mean, initially when the Lord introduced His presence on a mountain to Israel, it was not something that you wanted to be a part of. I know the other night we had, I don't know what Saxy got, but we had a pretty big thunderstorm. There were winds, and you always, whenever you hear the winds and the rain in Dallas-Fort Worth, you keep listening to make sure that heavy rain remains heavy rain. Because sometimes that heavy rain can start falling so hard that you can't tell the difference between heavy rain and, you know, that other stuff. The frozen rain. And so you're, okay, maybe it's pea size. Well, the news report's reporting that it's golf size hail. And so you're worried about that because, well, when the Lord presents His presence on the Mount Sinai, there's thunderstorms and dark clouds, earthquakes. You just don't want to go near. Moses, you go right ahead. You go up there and you give us a briefing. You take your phone, you record it, whatever, and you bring us back pictures. They're not going, no one's going near that mountain. So who can dwell in the Lord's tent? Who can live on His holy mountain? I remember, now I know I'm dating myself here, I remember back when I actually did watch basketball. I watched basketball back in the days of Larry Bird and the Lakers and Michael Jordan. I mean, once Michael Jordan retired, I just didn't care anymore. Kobe's good, LeBron's good, but once MJ retired, I'm out. It was the end of an era for me. But I remember watching, I don't even know who they were playing, but I remember it was a playoff game, and Jordan was doing his thing, and one of the commentators during the game was a guy who used to play for the Detroit Pistons named Isaiah Thomas. And one of his fellow commentators said, I just don't understand how some of these players look like high schoolers when they come up to guard Michael Jordan. And Isaiah Thomas responded, well, you just don't know the fear that grips your heart when you realize you've got to guard Michael Jordan. It's just an initial, you freeze. And by the time you realize that you need to guard him, you've been posterized. He's already behind you with his tongue hanging out, jumping 20 feet in the air and dunking the ball. And then there's a poster with you doing this. And it's over, right? You just don't know the fear that grips your heart. So verse 1 is that kind of question. Who can get in the ring with Muhammad Ali? You want to get in the ring with Muhammad Ali, back in his prime. Who can get into the octagon of MMA? And if you know MMA, I don't know any MMA people. Whoever the biggest and baddest fighters are, you don't want to get in the ring with or you don't want to do that because you're going to have a bad day, right? Who wants to pitch against Babe Ruth? I mean, those kinds of things. That's the question here. Who can dwell in your tent? Who can live in your holy mountain? And notice, a lot of these psalms are called ascension psalms because if you're going to go to Mount Zion in Jerusalem, you're going to be going up. No matter where you are around the mountain, you're going to go up. And so if you're going to ascend the mountain, sometimes these psalms would be quoted by the Jewish people as they would go up. It was like their liturgy. Or if you want to say praise songs, and many times they would recite them. Who can dwell in the Lord's presence? Who can dwell in His tent? As they would go up to the temple to worship. As a reminder. Now the Lord's not in a tent. The Lord's not on a mountain now. Well, He's not presenting His presence in that way. Now we find out that the temples, the Lord's in a different kind of building program now because the temple is made up of living bricks. Bricks that are organic, made up of people. Right? And so now the Lord's presence is in His people. Very important. The Lord's presence is not defined by this building. This building is not the Lord's house. All right, you, if you know the Lord, the Spirit is in you, and you collectively and individually are the Lord's house. So if that's the case, then the Psalm's implications are even stronger, because you don't have to go up a mountain. You just look in the mirror. If you know Christ, then the Spirit of God, the presence of the Lord, is in you. You're a walking temple. If you didn't know that, you are. So then the question is, well, okay, how do you go up to the Lord's presence and not wear out your welcome? How do you do it and dwell in His tent and live there? What do we do? Well, verses 2 through 5 give the answer. Verse 2 is kind of a synopsis statement, and then verses 3 through 5 kind of flesh it out. Verse 2, here's the one, man or woman, who can dwell in his tent and live on his holy mountain. The one, notice here, the one who lives blamelessly. Okay, what does that mean? The one who lives blamelessly practices righteousness. In other words, the one who lives blamelessly is one whose life is marked by activities that honor the Lord. Now you may think, well, okay, well, that's still broad. What does that look like? He's going to give a description of some things that can mean. It's very important. A psalm, any passage of the Scripture you're reading, it can never say everything about a topic. It's a very frustrating thing about preaching. So many, I want to say this, I want to say this, I can't. I only say a few things and be invited back. Right? So you can't say everything. Well, a psalm can't give you everything about what it means to be blameless or practice righteous, but it's going to give a few. Okay? But if you're going to dwell in the Lord's presence, if you're going to come worship the Lord, notice it doesn't say, verse 2, the first thing to be able to dwell in the Lord's presence or on His holy mountain is one who can sing well. Is it good if you can sing well? Yes, because then you don't have to hear me. It's much better if you sing well loudly. You don't have to listen to me make a joyful noise. That's a good thing. But it's not sufficient, right? It's not singing or preach well. Please don't say whether that's going on or not. So that's not part of it. One who lives a certain way. One whose conduct is in a certain pattern. Blameless doesn't mean sinless. Very important. You read all kinds of these Psalms. Blessed is the one who does this. Blessed is the one who does that. Well, sometimes we don't do all those things to be blessed. That's why you have one psalm, blessed is the one to whom the Lord does not impute sin. Blessed is the one to whom the Lord gives forgiveness. All right, so blameless is not sinless, but it is a pattern. Okay? That practices righteousness, and then notice, and acknowledges the truth in his heart. In other words, okay, the one who wants to dwell with the Lord, who wants to worship the Lord, who wants to be in the Lord's presence, that person needs to have a way they conduct themselves when they live, and they need to have a certain way that they think. Both and. It's interesting for me as a Bible college professor, seminary professor, one of the struggles I have with students a lot of times is students fall into the trap of they know a lot of theology, or they know a lot of biblical studies, they know a lot of biblical backgrounds, they know a lot of church history, they know a lot of philosophy, they know a lot of things that are helpful and good and beneficial, but they think if they have everything from the neck up, then that's enough, and then they can go live like the devil. No. All the stuff that's here is not to make it this big. It's everything up here is supposed to enable you to do what's correct in every venue of life. But then a lot of times what's ironic for me in churches is sometimes it's just the opposite. Yeah, I'll minister with people in churches and they want to live for the Lord. They love the Lord. They want to serve Christ. They want to go for it, but they don't want to study the Bible at all. They don't want to grow in their knowledge of the Lord. They don't want to expand their horizons, understand the Bible better. They just want to love Jesus. Which is, who doesn't want to love Jesus as a Christian? Of course we do. But what does that mean? If I were to ask someone, what is the gospel? Can you give me 4 sentences and describe to me what the gospel is according to the New Testament? If your answer is no, well, that's problematic. So here, David doesn't have a problem saying it's a certain way you live, and someone who acknowledges the truth in their heart. They know something and they live out what they know. Not just know it, not just live it out, because if you don't know anything and live it out, that's going to be chaos. But if you know a lot and don't live it out, that's a waste. Okay? The Lord has no tolerance for cocky, arrogant brainiacs who don't want to serve the Lord, and He has no tolerance for those who want to just have a fire-ready aim philosophy about life. If you aim at nothing, guaranteed you'll hit it. Every time. So notice, the one who can dwell with the Lord, live in His mountain, the one who lives blamelessly, has a pattern, and acknowledges the truth in their heart. In other words, they are genuine, authentic, and expressed in how they live. But now, okay, well, what does that look like? That still sounds kind of abstract. And so David, verses 3 through 5, in the short psalm that he wrote, let's give a description of something. If you want to be, notice here, everything he's going to talk about relates to other people. None of these verses are going to say, and again, don't misunderstand me, because the psalm can't say everything. He doesn't talk about how much time you spend in prayer. He doesn't talk about how many Awana Bible verses you memorized. He doesn't talk about did you go to Sunday school and church and choir, band practice, and all these different things. He doesn't say any of those things. Not that those things don't have their place, but here it relates to other people. If you want to dwell in the Lord's presence, if you want to worship Him, if you want to say, quote unquote, you're God-centered, then how do you treat the person sitting next to you? Well, if you want to be in the Lord's tent, on the Lord's mountain, in the Lord's presence, what are you like in other people's presence? That's the point. So, what are some of the things to look for? Verse 3. Who lives blamelessly, who practices righteousness, who acknowledges the truth in the heart. Verse 3. The one who does not slander with his tongue. The one who is not speaking great things to your face, but then behind your back, slicing you and dicing you. Slander. And now there are a host of different ways that can happen. I'm not going to go into different details here, but just the basic point that someone who is looking for an opportunity to tear someone down, don't do that and then go up the mountain and want to visit with the Lord. Don't do that. Or don't expect the Lord to answer the door when you want to come in. The one who does not slander with his tongue. I think I've mentioned this before. Be very wary of people who want to talk to you and slander other people. Because if they do slander other people to you, that means they will slander you to other people. And also, if you are the slanderer, always recognize that slander, or you want to use the good Baptist word, gossiping, right? It has a boomerang effect. If you're slandering and constantly criticizing someone on this side of your mouth, always recognize that it always has a way of spinning, and then the last moment when you don't expect it, hitting you in the back of the head. Someone's gossiping about you. Well, it's not gossip if it's true. Here's the way to determine whether it's gossip or not. Would you say what you're saying with that person in your presence? Would you say it? That's a pretty good determiner. Would you say it to the person in your presence? If not, could be a red flag. Let top lip meet Mr. Bottom Lip for a while. That's a good. Top lip and bottom lip on a lot of people have never met. You believe that? Never met. Okay? Sometimes they need to meet permanently. Okay? One who does not slander with his tongue, and then notice, who does not harm his friend or discredit his neighbor. In other words, harm here is not just simply wound or lynch or anything like that, but obviously that could be part of it. But the point is, someone who's not trying to constantly manipulate other people to their own advantage. If your life is constantly dictated by self-interest only, don't expect the Lord to listen to your singing on Sunday morning. It's very important in the Old Testament. There's one point where the temple gets destroyed and the Lord brings Israel back and He tells them to rebuild the temple and actually rebukes them because they won't, and then they obey and they do, and then later he says, I wish you'd never built it. Wait a minute, he rebuked them for not building it, and they built it, and now he's upset. Yeah, because they didn't build it and follow the ramifications. They were just doing it out of routine. Yeah, okay, we built the temple. They weren't doing it because they wanted to worship. They just did it because it's what they do. And the Lord basically responds, you think that's why the temple's supposed to be built? Because it's a routine? That's why you did it? Just so you could give me a tip? You could tip me? So here, don't think that you're going to worship the Lord and sing wonderful songs and serve and etc. and say all wonderful things to each other, but during the week you're a slanderer or you're taking advantage of your neighbor. The Lord's not listening. It's a very dangerous, very sobering thing to realize that sometimes when you sing to the Lord, you're singing solo and nobody's listening. A lot of times the Lord's not listening. Notice that's verse 3. Verse 4, verse 4 is very interesting here because you have to kind of really pay attention here. One who despises the one rejected by the Lord and honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps his word at whatever the cost. Notice verse 4 here, David says, someone who wants to live with the Lord, someone who wants to be in his holy mountain, someone who wants to be in his presence constantly, the kind of person that can visit with the Lord is someone who has the right kind of role models. In other words, if you want to be with the Lord, you want to be changed by the Lord's presence, then when it comes to people around you, who do you set up as your role models? David says, if you're not one who despises the one rejected by the Lord, then you have a problem. In other words, if the Lord is against the wicked or those who are opposed to Him, and the Lord in the Psalm sometimes is at war with those who do not obey Him. If you are constantly looking to those who could care less about the Lord as your role models, but those who love the Lord, those who are committed to the Lord, those who are committed to obeying Him, those people you ignore, David says, then why do you want to be with the Lord? Why would you want to be in the Lord's presence, but you could care less about others who want to be in His presence? The only people you listen to or care about are people who could care less about the Lord. It's a very dangerous thing. I remember my daughter, she'll be 18 in July. And I can remember her growing up. Everybody has music they listen to, and sometimes certain TV shows that they watch and things like that. And obviously parents, you have to be careful and all that. But I remember there were certain times where there would be, because she loves music and theater. That's her passion. That's what she loves. Singing and drama. Stage drama. Stage drama. Her last play this year, Mary Poppins. Everybody's invited. There, did my dadly duty. And I can remember a few times where she would, she's growing up and she would have certain musicians or people that she just loved to listen to. And I didn't want to be the dad downer. I didn't want to be the dad, but I remember on occasion, at certain moments, I would just say, hey, sweetheart, what that person's doing right now, they're really popular, but I just want to let you know. I just want to let you know something. In about 5 years, they're going to crash and burn. What do you mean, Dad? Because just watch where they are now and how they're going to escalate. And what's going to happen is their talent is going to take them where their character can't keep them. Because they don't have any character. But they've got a lot of talent. And that talent's going to take them, and then when character is demanded, they're going to crash, and you're going to be disappointed. So I'm just letting you know that now. Oh, Dad, the only part where I was wrong was the crash was even bigger than I thought it would be. Be careful and also too, it happens all the time in sports. All the time in sports. You got a lot of talent, you got a lot of ability, but you have no integrity, you have no character, you have no maturity, and then you get promoted and you're the best thing on campus or the best thing on the field or the best thing on the court or the best thing on the track, and everybody gives you attention, you have no character, and it's like going up a roller coaster too fast. If you go up a roller coaster too fast, and what happens? You throw up. And that's what people throw up in life because they can't handle it. They don't have any integrity. And here, David says, if those kinds of people are the people that are your role models, then don't talk about wanting to be with the Lord. Don't talk about wanting to be in the Lord's presence when the people you look up to in life are people who only care about money and popularity and notoriety and stuff. If that's what your role model, and power, if those are the people that your role model, then why don't you go be in their presence? The reason you don't want to be in their presence is because those role models could care less about you. They could care less about you. So David says, who are the ones who are consistently known to love Jesus or love the Lord and follow Him? Those should be your role models. I mean, people that I consider my heroes, y'all don't know any of them. y'all don't know any of them. I mean, what you do know, one, I remember when I used to work with Dr. Wilson, Dr. Joe Wilson, one of the things, he doesn't know this, but he used to frustrate me because when he would pray, maybe he still does, he would always start off with, "and Father." And I remember asking somebody one time, why does he always say "and"? And a student told me this, because for Dr. Wilson, the conversation never stops. How am I supposed to compete with that? Well, it's not about competing, but that's a role model. Okay? But you're not going to see him on, at least I don't think so, on the Oscars or the Emmys or what's the music one? The Grammys. Dr. Wilson on the Grammys. Now, I would actually pay money to see that one. That's not going to happen. All right? It's not going to happen because two antithetical ways of looking at life. And David's point here, if you want to go dwell with the Lord, be on His holy mountain, dwell in His tent, then whenever you leave His tent or leave the mountain, who do you look up to? People who follow the Lord or people who could care less about the Lord? That's David's point. And notice, follow those who keep His word whatever the cost. I know reading is not a popular thing for a lot of people, but I'm a professor, so reading's part of my life. I would encourage all the young people, before you finish high school, to read just one, pick as short as you like, one Christian biography. One biography on one great Christian. You pick them. If you don't know of any of them, I'd be glad to give you a list of them. Just a short one, not even a 100-page short biography on a great Christian. Just to see what the Lord can do in a person's life that's made of the same stuff you're made of. Nothing unique about them, their genetics, DNA. There's people that were wanted to be used by God, and God used them. Just all kinds. Just read one. Just one. Before you get bombarded by the billboards of our culture. So David says, the one who is blamelessly practices righteousness, knowledge, truth in his heart, is one who doesn't slander their friends, their neighbors, the one who looks up to those who love the Lord, not those who could care less about the Lord. And then verse 5, notice interesting. Verse 5, he says something about money. Says something about money. Also, one who does not lend his silver at interest. That's interesting, talking to our culture. Or take a bribe against the innocent. The idea when he says not lend his silver at interest, in the Old Testament, lending to a friend or a neighbor was never to be for the purpose of making money. I know it could go in a lot of different directions here, but I won't. Okay? But in the Old Testament economics, lending was actually to help somebody. You believe that? Now, did it have to be paid back? Well, yeah, it had to be paid back. Were there exceptions? Well, sure, there could be exceptions. But lending was not for a profit. It was condemned when it came to... Now, what if it's an Israelite with someone from another nation? Well, now there could be issues like that where you might have interest to make sure that you're not exploited. But who's ever heard of that? We charge interest because we want to make sure that you're not a crook. No, it's not usually the way we think. But for the Old Testament, usually lending money was, hey, you're in a real bind here. Here's what you need, whether it's to buy an ox or to help your crops or whatever, and here's the agreement when you pay it back. But there was no loan sharking going on. You never had to have Liberty Mutual commercials in the Old Testament. Well, I got the wrong insurance company. Well, you don't have to worry about that. So the one who doesn't lend silver at interest, in other words, when he lends to help people, it's actually to help people. It's not for self-interest. Okay? Now, I'll have some people come up to me and say, so, Dr. Berry, are you saying the Bible teaches socialism? This is my bumper sticker answer to that question. Socialism says, what's yours is mine. Christianity says, what's mine is yours. Big difference. Big difference. Okay? Yes, what's mine is yours. What do you need? I will freely give what you need. Socialism is, what's yours? Well, it's actually mine too. Not the same thing. So that's the bumper sticker answer to that. But here, the point David's saying is, people are using funds, using their money to help, not to exploit. Or, notice this, not just lend silver and interest, or take a bribe. Yeah, I'm willing to do the right thing for the right price. Yeah, I'm willing to do what needs to be done if the money's right. Yeah, no. Someone who's upstanding in how they deal with their money. They're not shady. But David's point is, don't think for a minute that you're going to be able to walk up on the Lord's hill to his address and ring his doorbell and you are a crook or subversive in how you treat other people in order to exploit them financially. Don't do that. The one who does these things, finally, who listens to everything I'm saying, the one who does these things will never be shaken. So notice, if you want to be able to worship the Lord and know that there is communion and that there is acceptance and that there can be change in the Lord's presence, if you want to know that, then be extremely cautious and also be, I'm trying to think of the right word. This is happening when you get to 45. Can't think of the right word, but live your life in a way where you're paying attention to what you're doing. Okay? In how you make decisions and treating other people, think before you act. Think before. Is that always going to happen? No, of course not. I mean, there's too many times in my life where I'm mashing down on the gas and I haven't even put the car in gear. I mean, maybe it's to the floor. Why am I moving? Well, gear first. Yeah, I mean, of course we're going to mess up. But the key to messing up is admitting you mess up. And then going from there. But David's point is, if you want to be in the Lord's presence, what are you like in the presence of others? That's basically the synopsis of the psalm. What are you like in other people's presence? Do you exploit people? Do you manipulate people? When you're dealing with other people, is it always somebody else's fault for your faults? You've always got a reason why you can blame somebody else. Or are the heroes, the people you look up to, people who care less about the Lord? I'm not saying you can't look at people who are not Christians and learn something from them. Of course you can. Of course you can. I mean, if I've got to have heart surgery and I got a choice between a Christian who's never done one and an atheist who's done 500 successfully, I'm going with the atheist. Okay? Don't misunderstand me. But when it comes to a role model for life, I'm not looking at that heart surgeon. Okay? I'll look at him as a role model for a good heart surgeon, but not someone who's good at living life. Who are your role models? The people you look up to. And even here's the thing, even those who you look up to, never put them on a pedestal. Even the ones you look up to. Love them, respect them. Please don't, because it's just a recipe for heartache. I mean, there are men and women today that they love the Lord, they've been faithful for years, and I revere them. But I don't put them on pedestals anymore. I don't even want people, I mean, I'm not that people would, but I don't want anybody putting me on a pedestal. Please don't. Especially as a professor. Ooh, Dr. Berry. Don't do that. Because whenever I mess up, it's just going to be a disappointment. So don't do it. So even the ones you do follow them to a degree. Love them to a degree. Because we can all mess up. I remember one, you remember Brother Elmore. He's been a pastor for years and does interim work in his retirement years. He told me one time, and man, this was true. He said, when a church goes through a building program, never name a building after a donor who's still alive. And I said, really? Well, I was trying to figure out the logic. And he said, because you never know what they might do before they die. You never know what these, now if they're with the Lord, name away. If they do something after they're dead, you find out, that's impressive. But if they're alive, you never know what they could be busted for or find out. So just better not to do it. It's true. It's true. We're all fallible. We're all made of dust. Okay? And the best thing to do is create safeguards, right? And then also, again, how do we treat each other with how we speak? James, in the book of James, says it this way. I'll modernize it, paraphrase it. Singing wonderful choruses and praises in 1 hour with our tongues, and the next hour we leave this room and our tongues are slandering each other. You got fresh water coming out 1 hour and bitter, nasty sewage water coming out the next. Brethren, as James would say, these things not ought to be. Shouldn't be that way. So if you want to be in the Lord's presence and worship Him as God's people and be changed by His presence, one initial qualification. Ask yourself, how do you act in the presence of others? And there's a list. And there are other Psalms that have more on the list. Right? Psalm 24 actually has a lot of Psalm 15 and then adds to it. Right? But let's be careful in how we love each other, because if we don't love each other, we can see each other, right? Sometimes smell each other. See each other, smell each other, shake hands with each other. We can tangibly contact each other. You can't do that with the Lord. So how are you going to love the Lord on His mountain, the one who you can't see, but not those who you can? Let's pray. Father, we thank You so much for Your truth. And Lord, how Your Word it reveals everything we need to see about who You are and who we are and how we need You. And Father, I pray that You would help all of us, Lord, every time that we're coming together to serve You, worship You, that we would always ask ourselves the questions that David asks before he approached the mountain to worship You. Thank You, Lord, for Your presence. Thank You, Lord, for Your mercy whenever we fail, that we can be forgiven. And Lord Jesus, we pray these things in Your name. Amen. Again, bless each of you for being here this morning. After our announcements, again, we'll have our elders and myself in the front and the back for anyone who may need to pray about any special needs, or maybe you have questions about the church, or maybe questions about receiving Christ and want to become a Christ follower. But please, don't leave here after we're done with any questions or needs that maybe you need someone to minister with you. Lord bless you for the trip.
Again, we're excited that you chose to worship with us today. We've seen a couple of visitors. Please fill out the card in front of you. Let us know that you were here. Give us some contact information. Our elders and secretary would like to send you some information about our church. Also, members, if you have any contact information that's changed, I know that there's some stuff going on between Angie and Amy about getting all the records straight. So this would be a great time to make sure that you have all your contact information squared away. In the bulletin in front of you, I believe it says that the youth auction is April 30th. That is wrong. It's being changed to May 28th. That's a time period where those that chose to go to camp, well, they'll be auctioned off for 4 hours of work. It's probably our biggest fundraiser that we've had for camp over the last few years. That was a wonderful sermon. Occasionally I come up here and say funny things, and occasionally I'm not paying a lot of attention sometimes to the message because something is said and I'm thinking things. Your message was so good today that Angie turned to me and she goes, I bet you there's a million funny things going on in your head right now. She goes, you could throw Connor and Cole right under the bus right now. And I was like, well, I guess I could. You know, things that are set up at the pulpit, I mean, your dad could say something, but I mean, if it's set up at the pulpit, I mean, that is law. I mean, we just solved the whole Jordan-LeBron debate right there, and I don't ever want to do it in my house again. I mean, man of God said it, that's it. The end, it's over. All right, Brother Joel would like to come up and talk about the pastor's search, and then he will lead the prayer for the offering.
Real quick, I have an announcement as well. Starting next week, there's going to be boxes on the front of the stage with all the band members' names and their role within the band or the sound or the production. For a few reasons. One, so you guys can see how many people it takes to put on our worship every Sunday. But I would really like for you guys to take the time to write a thank you card or an appreciation card for each of them. Everyone on the stage behind me is volunteer, and backstage is volunteer, and up in the crow's nest is volunteer. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to have boxes on the stage for you guys just to shower them with love and with gifts and appreciation. And then I'll give those to them in the next couple weeks. So starting next week, they'll have their name and their job that they do as far as volunteer for me in the band and the production on Sundays and Wednesdays. So if you guys could just take the time to write a thank you card to them, that would be, I would really appreciate that, because they mean the world to me and I can't do what I do without them. And so if we could just really appreciate them next week, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'll take just a couple minutes to update you on our pastor search process. During the month of May, we'll be bringing 2 candidates to you to hear and to interact with. Reverend Mike Donlan will be with us on May the 7th, and on May the 21st, Dr. Aaron Baraz will be with us. So you'll have an opportunity after the service to interact with them, ask questions to them. And then later on that afternoon, the deacons and the trustees will meet with them. And during the whole month of May, their resume will be up on our website. Their response to our questionnaire will be up there also. And a video link or an audio link so that you can hear them speak. After they speak here in the church, then we'll also put that up there for you to look at. And we'll come back together on June the 4th and we'll vote as a congregation who you believe the Lord is leading to be the pastor of our church. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask Alan, Malcolm, or George, or myself, and we will answer them for you.
I'm going to pray for the offering. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you again for the message from Dr. Everett this morning. Lord, I pray for the offering as we take monies in, Lord, that you would use that just to further this church and to further your kingdom and give wisdom to those who decide where it goes, Father. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Young stand with us in worship.
The